Today's episode of the Presleevables is brought to you by Tales of Adventure. First of all, you're going to want to head over to toamagic.com. That's the website for Tales of Adventure, where you can find the best deals on singles and seal product from standard releases all the way up to vintage. For the higher end cards, those cards come with individual scans, so you can actually see the card that you're purchasing before you make a decision. Also, be making sure to follow at TOA Michael on Twitter. That's the handle for the store owner, Michael Caffrey. He regularly posts sales and deals throughout the week, so you're going to be wanting to follow that account as well. Lastly, make sure to use promo code Resleevables at checkout for 8% off any order, and keep in mind that all domestic orders are shipped with free tracking. Again, that's toamagic.com, at TOA Michael on Twitter, and use promo code Resleevables at checkout for 8% off of your order.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Presleevables Wilds of Eldraine edition. I'm your host, Cedric Phillips, at Cedric A. Phillips on all the things, and I am joined by, as always, Patrick Sullivan at Basic Mountain on Twitter. Patrick, it's our final video of our preview/review of Wilds of Eldraine. We've gone through our mechanics breakdown right at the top. We've done all 5 colors, and we've also done a multicolor review/preview if you want to check all those things out and haven't yet, which means we got to get through some artifacts and apparently some creature lands.
Yeah, this part is pretty light. There are not a ton of artifacts or new lands in the set. So, we'll still go over our 5 and talk about it at length or whatever, but I'll say there was not as much competition for the top 5 as usual, just out of, default. Very few artifacts and several reprints among those artifacts.
So I'm going to start with my top 5. Now, if you're new around these parts, what we do is I pick my top 5 cards from what I believe is going to be competitive and constructed, and Patrick picks his top 5 of
cards I like, designs I find appealing, novel solutions to gameplay challenges with certain mechanics. Just stuff I like. My favorite stuff.
That's how we keep him coming back. He just gets to do the things that he likes. And that works for us, and that works for him. Number 5 for me is a card that I've cast before and presumably will cast again. It's a reprint. It's Soul Guide Lantern. This kind of speaks to what you're talking about in the artifact section of things. It's a decent amount of reprints, actually. Soul Guide Lantern's got some new art, but for those of you who've not seen it before, it's a single mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, exile target card, a singular one from a graveyard. Could be mine, could be yours. And then you can tap this to sacrifice Soul Guide Lantern and exile each opponent's graveyard, not mine. And then I can pay 1 and tap it and sacrifice Soul Guide Lantern to draw a card. So ETB, get a card, and then either I'm going to cold your graveyard, or if you're not really doing any graveyard nonsense, I'm going to sacrifice it and draw a card.
Sweet.
Been seeing it forever.
Good against graveyards and fine if they're not doing anything with the graveyard.
Yeah, nothing really new here. There's plenty of 1 mana graveyard hate cards. There's, of course, Relic of Progenitus comes to mind. Soul Guide Lantern is one. Nile Spellbomb, Tormod's Crypt, all kind of fits into, depending on what metagame you're in, which one you want, all that jazz. So there you go. Number 5 on your list is Seer Ginger, the Meal Ender. My vote for best card name in the set.
Super fun. Actually is not a bad artifact to have floating around in terms of a bit of a backstop against planeswalkers. Like, it is legitimately good against just decks with planeswalkers.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that it speaks to food, but not, super prescriptively. You can do it with other stuff. It's got the food thing on itself, which is common for the gingerbread people, but a slightly different twist on it.
Yeah, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it real quick so everybody knows what it does. 2 mana, 3/1, legendary artifact creature, Food Knight. Sure, of course it's a knight. Why wouldn't it be? Seer Ginger the Meal Ender has trample, hexproof, and haste as long as an opponent controls a planeswalker. So that speaks towards the ability to actually just really destroy a planeswalker pretty easily. Whenever another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Seer Ginger and scry 1, so some value there. And then, of course, you can tap 2 and sacrifice Seer Ginger. You gain life equal to its power. So the min, the min's not actually correct, I guess, technically. I was going to say the min is 3. More often than not, you're going to gain 3. Could be more than that.
Could be more, depending if you've used the second power or whatever. I also, in terms of just the set having kind of a whimsical tone to it, in a lot of spots, I appreciate that the planeswalkers are often just the most important storyline characters you know, or this is the most powerful the nicol boluses of the world or whatever.
Okay.
And it's like, who is the hero we need to fight down these legends? Sir Ginger.
This thing on a gingerbread horse.
Absolutely love it. Charming, whimsical, good gameplay, good incentives. Just another design that's fun to read, and I'm guessing will be also fun to play with.
It's hard to argue that this card's not cool. It actually made my list as well. It's number 3 on mine, so we're going to skip number 3 on mine when we get to it. But we're going to go to number 4 right now, which is another reprint. I know not the most exciting of things is Prophetic Prism, but that's number 4 on my list because it's an oldie, but it appears to always just be a goodie. 2 mana artifact, enters the battlefield, draw a card. You can pay 1 and tap the Prophetic Prism to add 1 mana of any color, so it just filters mana and it cantrips.
Any permanent that's cheap and draws a card has context with bargain too.
Very good point.
So
Very good point. Didn't even think about that.
yeah, you don't get that with Soul Guide Lantern because to draw a card you actually have to sack it.
Yeah.
But this is just, you know, low opportunity cost material for whatever your bargain stuff is.
Super good call. Didn't even cross my mind, and that's actually makes Prophetic Prism probably more valuable than I think I realize for constructed purposes. Yeah. All right, number 4 on your list is Hilda's Crown of Winter. So let's take a look-ski here. I kind of liked this card, actually. So 3 mana legendary artifact. You can pay 1 colorless and tap it to tap target creature. This ability costs 1 less to activate during your turn. So on your turn, it's just free to activate. And then you can pay 3 and sacrifice Hilda's Crown of Winter to draw a card for each tapped creature your opponents control. Now, there's like a small sub-theme in this set of like freezing permanents, putting stun counters on them and everything. And so there's the ability to, especially in limited, maybe constructed, who knows, to draw 3, 4, like 5 cards off of this thing.
Potentially, yeah. And remember that this is also activated at instant speed and doesn't require tapping.
Yeah.
So if your opponent just attacks you with stuff that doesn't have vigilance, you just pop it there for your cards.
Sure.
I think the story here is just really great. It reads and looks like a legendary card, and it does have an out to the legendary drawback, which is you can sack it to draw a card for each, but it's not guaranteed that that's going to happen or even be particularly good.
Okay.
A lot of times they try to do the get out from under this legendary restriction. It involves things like cycling or something very close to cycling.
Yep.
This has, certainly it is an out some amount of the time, and it's actually quite a potent out when it's good because you have a good chance of drawing another one and then doing it again immediately, depending on how the game has gone.
Okay, sure.
But it's unlikely to go that way.
Yep.
And I like that it is a, icy manipulator style effect, but there is a discount for using it proactively on your own turn.
So one thing that's interesting about this card to me is it better if you're like a control deck, or is it better if you're an aggressive deck?
I would guess a control deck, because that, to me, where most of the power of this card rests is in the, all right, I have no blockers, come get it. And you have to sit there thinking about how many things you want to attack with. It's like the settle the wreckage dilemma.
Okay, sure.
So I think it's for a control deck, but the fact that the Icy Manipulator part of this card is 3 mana and 0 if you're just using it to clear a path, means there could be some purpose there.
Yeah, okay. So I guess what took me a minute to connect with this is the settle the wreckage style of play that you're talking about, which is, let's just say hypothetically, like they play that like the song, like make all the rats and your creatures have haste. Mm-hmm. It's okay, well, how many are you attacking with? Right. Yeah, that's actually kind of an interesting question. So, okay. Yeah, this could be some high upside. I wouldn't be surprised if this all playing constructed either, honestly. More standard than the other format, but it wouldn't surprise me. Number 3 for me, as I mentioned, was Seer Ginger, the meal ender. So we're going to stick with Patrick here. And for his number 3 is 3 Bowls of Porridge, which is also one of my favorite cards in this set. 2 mana artifact food. You can pay 2 and tap it, and you choose one that hasn't been chosen before. 3 Bowls of Porridge deals 2 damage to target creature, tap target creature, or sacrifice 3 Bowls of Porridge and gain 3 life.
So this is awesome.
Whoever made this card should get a raise.
I like doing food tokens that are strictly better than food. If they're cards you actually have to play with.
Yep.
And also you get 3 different things broken up however. Awesome.
Yep.
And also the story, masterpiece.
I totally agree.
1 bowl, too hot, that deals damage.
That's
one
right.
bowl, too cold, that taps.
Yep.
And 1 bowl, just right. That's the one you eat. What can you say?
I just want to know. I just want to know if this was one person, this was multiple people who work at Wizards, whoever did this card. It's awesome. It's super cool. Don't care if it's constructed playable or not. Doesn't matter to me at all.
I want to give another shout out to something I like about this card. Food is, by its nature, pretty color pie breaking.
Yep.
Just permanents that gain life. Weird to be giving to red and to blue. And this one is, there's a red-black output, a blue-white output, and then the food output.
That's also true.
So if we're bleeding all the colors, then we're kind of bleeding none of them. It's just its own thing.
Yeah.
Great.
It's super cool. Number 2 for me on my list is Agatha's Soul Cauldron. This one's getting a lot of conversation, everybody. Frank Carson apparently put together a really large article with 20 different combos with this card. Let's read it first because there's a lot going on here. It is a 2-mana legendary artifact. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. Creatures you control +1/+1 counters on them have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. You can tap this thing to exile target card from a graveyard, any graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So look, I'm going to tell you this straight up. I don't know all the combos with this card. I don't really know like any of the combos of this card except for kind of one. Doesn't mean it's like an infinite combo or anything, but it's talking to our good friend Tommy Ashton, and he was like, yeah, hardened scales. If you exile a Walking Ballista, or yourself Walking Ballista, and I was like, that's tough to beat.
Yeah, I have a feeling just creatures that can tap to untap another creature is another. Sure, there's something there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know them all. I don't think we as a community know them all yet, but I think over time we're all going to figure out what they are. I'm sure there's some sort of infinite combo in here, game winner, put something like dredge something into your graveyard, exile that, you're off to the races somehow, some way, whatever. It just reads not like a mistake. It just reads like this thing's up to no good.
Yeah.
That's all the card reads as.
I mean, I'm not saying this is even good. I'm just making sure I understand the card. So you could also do theoretically like Entomb Gristlebrand, play any creature, effectively reanimate.
Yeah, so you exile that. Something has a +1/+1 counter on it. And then, yeah, it has Gristlebrand's powers.
It's not a 7/7 lifelinker, but
you still get to pay 7 life to draw 7 cards.
Yeah, this seems like there's got to be stuff to do.
Yeah. There's a lot of creatures in Magic's history that have activated abilities.
There's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's something that's good with this.
Yeah, I'm sure Frank found, I know he posted an article, there's 20. I'm sure some people in various boards and discords and something have found some other things, and I'm excited to see what those things are. So I can't tell you what they are myself. Maybe you can tell me in the YouTube comments, but there's obviously something going on here. Maybe it should be number 1. Number 1, we have the same one we'll get to in just a second, but your number 2 is Candy Trail, which, let's take a little look-ski here. It is a 1-mana artifact food clue. You don't see that every day. Enters the battlefield, you scry 2, and then you pay 2 and sacrifice Candy Trail. You gain 3 life, and you draw a card over the value.
Yeah. Again, I like doing the strictly better than food actual cards in the food set.
Yeah.
Something that I think, the Eldraine sets could use a healthy bit of. And the story here is just really, really funny. And this is kind of in some ways, a dangerous collection of stuff. Like gaining life and drawing cards is a powerful combination because it's the space you need to draw to deploy your extra cards.
Yep.
But this is on a recipe that's relatively modest. So you're letting people kind of mess around with the dangerous stuff, but hopefully at a rate where it's tolerable, but like not bad. 1 mana ETB scry 2 and then 2 to sack is this card doesn't seem weak to me.
It smooths out the draw.
Yeah. It's a lot of smoothing and it replaces itself and whatever. It's also something that if you had to sacrifice to a bargain, it's not the end of the world because you at least have a little something to show for yourself.
Yep.
With a scry 2. So I'm not even saying that it's an unplayable card, far from it. But giving people the experience of playing with fire a little bit. The 2 token types is pretty novel. And the story artwork does a lot too.
All right, everybody, it's time for number 1. This is the only time that we have number 1 the same here in this run of previewing a brand new set here on the Presleevables, and it is probably going to come as no surprise. It is the Iron Crag. So let's read it first. I know most people probably already know what this one does, but it is a 2-mana legendary artifact. It taps for a colorless, and then whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have the Iron Crag become a legendary equipment artifact named Everflame Hero's Legacy. If you do, it gains Equip 3, and equipped creature gets +3/+3 and loses all abilities. Now, for clarity, because I saw there was a little bit of difficulty for people here on Twitter, pretty sure I have this correct. This thing stops becoming a Mind Stone-esque card. It turns into an equipment. You have to pay 3 to equip, and then equipped creature gets +3/+3 and loses all other abilities. Not the creature, the artifact. So it just becomes a equipment that costs 3 to equip onto a creature and gives that creature +3/+3.
Right, because equipped creature gets +3/+3 is inside quotations.
That's correct.
That is the sum of the equipment power.
Yep.
What happens outside of the quotes is referencing the card itself.
Correct.
There you go.
That's it. So competitive constructive set over here is just like they don't make cards like this anymore. They don't print Mind Stones. This is not really a type of thing that they do anymore. Yeah, they'll print it on a creature. Green has plenty of 2-mana tap for a color type of things, and because you can generally kill them, so it's pretty safe to do. And I'm not saying you can't kill the Iron Crag, but anyone can play this, and that's pretty powerful.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, from a design perspective.
So again, we're playing with fire here. Wizards of the Coast have made it really well known. The cards like Mind Stone and even, let's say, Fire Diamond
Sure.
are not things that they want to balance standard around.
Talismans.
Yep. Yeah. So, and it's been years and years and years since something like this was legal in standard.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a, whoa, can't believe we're getting this. But a couple really great backstop to this one. It is a legendary card, and there is an out, but the out is pretty modest in the scheme of things.
Sure.
You get to convert this into a piece of equipment. 3 mana +3/+3 is actually 3 to equip +3/+3 is Volshock Battle Gear. I think it was an original Mirrodin.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, nothing impressive, obviously.
Yeah, very good in draft, but not close to a constructed player.
Yep.
So we're not talking like you get a great deal out of the thing. And that says nothing about what you're supposed to do with your 3rd and 4th copies should it come to it.
Yeah, if you even play 3 and 4.
It also, all of the protection that we're assuming here assumes you're playing with legendary creatures.
Okay.
Which is like, not every deck is doing that.
Yep.
Or maybe you have 1 or 2 of them. It's not reliable that you're going to be able to convert your extra copies. So this card reads and is way more splashy than Mind Stone.
Okay.
But I would argue it's considerably weaker than Mind Stone.
Oh, I think it's definitely weaker than Mind Stone.
Because 1 and draw a card is way better than 3 equip a legendary creature for +3/+3.
Totally agree.
And the deck building opportunity cost is so much higher.
So how many of these, like, this is just a generic question that I don't expect you to have an answer to, but how many of these are you supposed to play? I don't think the answer is 4.
I mean, if your blue-white control deck with no creatures played 1, I would be like, yeah, sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But once you're past that, if we're not talking about legendary creatures or caring about legendary permanents or really valuing ramping that much that you're willing to eat the cost of drawing dead copies, it starts getting pretty sketchy, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that.
If this was good in standard, wouldn't be shocked. There's a reason they don't do Mind Stone and Fire Diamond anymore. It's because that effect is really, really good.
Yep.
But for all the splash that this design has, there's a lot of subtle stuff kind of going on in the background that I think will make it much weaker than cards that appear much more modest.
Now, maybe this is a random thought I just had. Maybe this is the kind of card where you are interested in playing multiple copies because you can bargain it away.
Yeah.
Right? That's a thing.
Totally.
But there's obviously an opportunity cost if you have 2 of these in your opening hand, like you haven't drawn your bargain cards or something. So just a little something to think about. I just put it at number 1 simply because we don't see this in standard nowadays or really any other format.
If it ended up being really good, I wouldn't be shocked.
Me either.
And it's been so long since we've seen this style of effect that I think it's worth. Tie goes to the new thing.
Sure.
Totally fine.
Sure.
But I'm not as big of a believer, I think, compared to sort of a sampling of the community response.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over the top 5 list for each of our artifacts real quick. Number 5 for me was Soul Guide Lantern. Number 4 is Prophetic Prism. Number 3 is Seer Ginger, the Meal Ender. Number 2 is Agatha's Soul Cauldron. And then number 1 is the Iron Crag for me. For Patrick, number 5 is Seer Ginger, the Meal Ender. Number 4 is Hilda's Crown of Winter. Number 3 is 3 Bowls of Porridge. Number 2 is Candy Trail. And number 1 is the Iron Crag. Now, the artifacts, they're done. Normally, we would put a wrap on this episode and then do our final thing, but we're going to do the artifacts and lands together because it's really hard when there's really only 5 notable lands to say like, well, this is my favorite one from a constructed standpoint and this is my favorite one from a design standpoint. So we're just going to go through all 5 together. And that's it. And then we're going to call it on this preview run here of the Presleevables for Wilds of Eldraine. So I'm going to just go in order as they're listed alphabetically. I'm going to start things off with Restless Bivouac. This is your Boros creature land. Enters the battlefield tapped. They all do. This one, of course, taps for a red and a white. Then you can pay 1, a red and a white, and Restless Bivouac becomes a 2/2 red and white Ox creature. Until end of turn, it's still a land. When Restless Bivouac attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So, it's mana fixing, ETB tapped. Pretty good cost. 3 mana to make this into a 2/2, and then you can put the +1/+1 counter on itself.
Yes.
Okay. Thoughts?
You don't have to give a whole lot to enters the battlefield tap dual land to get it over.
Yep.
So it's important to know that these are like options on cards you could kind of consider playing anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, super fun. It seems fairly strong to me. I mean, this is sort of a persistent grower is a really powerful ability to put on a creature land because often the creature lands are just, all right, the window is open for me to hit. They've tapped out or whatever. I'm going to hit. Whereas creatures that grow, they're just in play the whole time.
Yep.
And so if your opponent has any answer to them, they just play it when it makes sense. So this really speaks to the growing element of this really speaks to one of the strengths that creature lands have, which is you don't have to expose it to risk if you don't want to.
Just so everyone knows, my generic thoughts on all 5 of these creature lands are going to be they're good for constructed because creature lands are just generally always good for constructed.
Yeah, it's hard for these not to show up.
Yeah, it's just how much better. Like, is one of them Treetop Village or Raging Ravine? So we move to Restless Cottage now. This is your Golgari based one. Again, ETB tapped. Taps for a black and a green. You can pay 2, a black and a green. Restless Cottage becomes a 4/4 black and green horror creature until end of turn. Still a land. Cool. When this thing attacks, create a food token and exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. That exiling thing is probably going to come up more than people realize because we see that with Hive. Yeah, that exiling that the Hive does from the Dungeons and Dragons set, that comes up more than you think. And then this thing's pretty big, and the food token probably matters too.
Yeah, it's just a good spread of stuff. And yeah, when this thing attacks, exile a card from the graveyard is a useful backstop to have.
Yeah.
Like maybe it doesn't come up in your standard format very much, but if it is coming up with any reliability, it's a good thing that it's there.
Yep.
Especially on a card that is and enters the battlefield tap land that requires essentially 5 mana, 4/+1.
Sure.
It's not like you're just stopping someone from getting out of the gates with their graveyard stuff. But if it's been going on for a long time or they're setting up something big, you can at least chip away at their best cards.
We're moving on to Restless Fortress. I think this one might be the worst one, but you may disagree. This is your Orzhov-based one. Of course, enters battlefield taps for a white and a black. You can pay 2 white and a black, so 4 total mana, and it becomes a 1/4 white and black nightmare creature until end of turn. That's still a land. And then when this one attacks, defending player loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life.
I don't know. I think this one's pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's just... again, the creature land enters the battlefield tap stuff speaks to trying to like kind of stretch the game out to having time to deploy your resources.
Okay.
So getting a blend of damage and gaining life is really, it's at least very appealing. Weak in the abstract is kind of hard because it's just, yeah, if these color combinations are good at all, you would play a bunch of these, one would assume. And I don't think any of these are strong enough where you would just play this color combination because of this land.
Okay.
So a lot of it's just going to fall out of what color pairings are good.
Sure.
But this doesn't seem weak to me by any means, even if it is the weakest of the 5, which I'm not sure about.
Do you think better... I know this probably isn't fair, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Better or worse than Shambling Vent?
I think this is weaker because it's just the difference between 3 and 4 mana is so huge.
Okay. Let's move on to Restless Spire. This is our Is It one. ETB tapped, taps for blue and a red. You can pay blue and a red, so this is our cheapest activation cost so far. Until end of turn, Restless Spire becomes a 2/1 blue and red elemental creature with, as long as it's your turn, this creature has first strike, it's still a land, and then when it attacks, scry 1.
I really like this design a lot.
Okay.
Often the blue-red one is going to be in a much fancier space than the red-white one, assuming you're doing the enemy pairings all at the same time.
Okay.
It's like, yeah, Boros is the aggressive one and it's kind of the fancy one.
Yeah.
So I, compare Needleverge Spire to Wandering Fumarole. Like, Wandering Fumarole is definitely the fancier of the two. You're toggling stats back and forth.
Yep.
Versus just the double striker. This one is the cheapest, I would argue the most aggressive. The fact that it has Scry 1 makes it still feel like an Izzet card, because scrying is pretty foundational to that color pairing.
Okay.
Hard to block early on, but certainly vulnerable to big stuff as the game goes on.
Yep.
I really like first strike only while attacking, which is what this essentially has.
Yeah, you're a big fan of that change to Magic.
Yeah, I've been talking about it for a long time. First strike while blocking is awful. Just don't do it that often.
It's not fun.
It's like, has anyone said I really miss first strike while blocking? Has anyone uttered that? I'm not having fun playing with these cards that only have first strike while I'm attacking. No, you just play with the cards and you have a good time because the cards are fun.
Doesn't really come up, no.
Yeah, so this is the design I think of the 5 I probably appreciate the most, because it would be very easy to just default to the blue-red gets some blue-red weirdo, and this is like actually the most straightforward beater of the bunch.
Last one. Don't know if it's the best one. A Restless Vine Stalk. So ETB tapped, green, blue. This is our Simic one. For 3 green and blue. Won't surprise you, this is the most expensive one to activate. And until end of turn, Restless Vine Stalk becomes a 5/5 green and blue plant creature with trample. And then when it attacks, up to one other target creature has base power and toughness 3/3 until end of turn. And I will note, that could be your creature or their creature.
Yeah. So no blocking.
Yeah, you could make their blocks not good, or you could make your like Llanowar Elf or Bird of Paradise or whatever significantly better.
Yeah, really fun. These designs are great.
This one, 5 mana is a lot.
Yeah,
this is because if I think of the 5 mana like creature lands that activate, Colonnade was 5, but Vigilance.
Yeah,
and that was also just kind of like, okay, I've got the game all figured out now. So now I get to start firing in with this, or like a racing situation, 4/4 flyer, vigilance, and like counter your spell, or play Path to Exile, something like that. 5's a ton, but this gives you a lot.
It does. Yeah, Colonnade has a couple things going on for it besides the fact that blue-white was completely busted in the standard format that it was in.
Yeah.
One is you effectively get a mana rebate.
Yep.
And 2 is, when the game goes on for a really long time, which it does in blue-white decks sometimes, you get to play offense-defense with your Colonnade.
Sure.
And that doesn't come up if you have to actually attack with it.
That's a very good point.
But yeah, I think it's just a pure creature land. Yeah, I would rather have 5/5 trample and transform a thing into a 3/3 than 4/4 vigilance just in the abstract.
Sure.
There was just stuff going on with Colonnade. Just blue-white control, defend myself the whole game and win with a creature land is just a play pattern that blue-white accommodates much more effectively than green-blue historically.
Yep.
But I think in terms of what would I rather spend 5 mana on average, it's this.
Okay, so I'm going to go down this pathway, even though it's not fair, but I'm going to do it anyway. All right, Restless Vinestalk or Lumbering Falls?
This one for Lumbering Falls is horrendous.
Okay, fair enough.
Easy.
Restless Bivouac or Needle Spires, which was the 4 mana 2/1 double strike.
Restless Bivouac.
Bivouac? Okay.
I think so.
We blue red one. So the 2 Restless Spire, I think it's called, the 2/1 first striker, or Fumarole.
Probably Fumarole, but they're for very different decks.
Okay. We did the Shambling Vents one already, and I think it's Shambling Vents.
I think so too.
Because Shambling Vents was really good on defense.
Yeah, that's another part of it.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last one. Let me get this up really quick. It is the black-green one. So Restless Cottage, which is the 4/4 that makes a food token exile something, or was Hissing Quagmire, which was 2/2 Death Touch.
I think the carriage is better.
Okay. All right.
Hissing Quagmire is...
It's not bad.
Horrendous.
Okay, well, you don't agree. That's fine. I don't think the Quagmire was that bad.
Well, the problem is, so some of the creature lands that work really well on defense is like... how you find that out is your opponent doesn't attack you. Your
Okay.
colonnades up. You've got mana besides. They've got some 3/3s, and they're like, all right, no attacks.
Okay.
How, when you're hissing Quagmire, when they attack into your hissing Quagmire, you know if I activate this thing, I'm going to get blown out somehow.
Sure. Or they're fine just trading like their land.
Right, exactly.
Or your creature for their
land.
land.
That's the thing, is they don't even have to be bluffing because it's
Sure.
so likely that you trade.
Sure.
So it's supposed to be good on defense, but it's not really good on defense.
Okay.
The carriage is at least a beater, and the graveyard stuff matters.
Okay. All right.
So I would call this list 2 better, 2 worse, 1 tie / it's confusing.
Okay. Sure. That.
Lumbering Falls. Ooh.
Yeah, that card stinks. That one I can't argue with. That card stinks. Did it get bigger? What did it do?
3/3
Hexproof?
Yeah.
Why do I think it got bigger for some reason? It didn't. Let me check really quick. Yeah, it just had hexproof. Okay, that's it.
There was the mechanic that put counters on lands, right? The Awaken.
Yeah, that was the
Was
thing.
it like this was like good to awaken? Maybe that's the reason you have that
Maybe.
recollection?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
That rings sort of a
It
bell.
doesn't matter. Like, again, these are stapled onto dual lands. Like, they don't have to be awesome to show up in decks and be good. I actually appreciate some of them being modest, but yeah, 2 better, 2 worse, and 1 tie among a cycle, all of which showed up in competitive play is like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But these cards will show up too.
Yeah, and yeah, these 5 are going to show up. It's kind of what you said. If the color combinations are any good, they're going to show up.
Yeah.
Right, and if they're not, then they won't, and maybe people will still try anyway. We just went over the lands that matter. Those are the creature lands. We did the artifacts at the top of this episode. And oh, by the way, if you haven't seen them yet, we did mechanics. We did white. We did blue. We did black. We did red. We did green. We did multicolor. That's 7. That's 8. That's 8 videos. That's a lot of those.
But well worth the time.
Yeah.
This is really fun.
I feel like I know a lot about this set now.
I had a good time reading these cards. This is great.
And I know I said in like a mechanics episode and over the course of doing this whole thing, not as good as Throne of Eldraine, and that's a good thing. Now, Wilds of Eldraine is not as good as that set, excuse me. But I think this set is cool. I think it will be impactful in Standard. How much, I don't know. It'll probably be impactful in other places, as most sets generally are. But at the very least, the thing I enjoyed most about doing this whole thing, getting ready for it and everything, is that the set list was fun to read, which I appreciate more than I can probably put into words right now.
Names, art, all of it. I actually like the very active and aggressive silliness on the gingerbread cards, because one gingerbread is sort of like, all right, what are we doing here? If you're just here's a half dozen of them, they're all goofy.
Yeah,
it's this is really fun and funny.
Yeah, and so what's different about this set for me, and this isn't a strike against the Lord of the Rings set. It's going to sound like it is, but it isn't. The Lord of the Rings set, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, it was probably a blast to read, right? And if you're not really entrenched in the Lord of the Rings at all, you're just kind of like, I don't know what's going on, really. I'm sure some of this stuff matters, but I don't really know why, which was my experience reading the set. Like, it's a lot of, like, I think it's a well-curated, well-designed set for Lord of the Rings fans, but if you're not one and you're just a Magic fan like I am, it's kind of like, I don't know, this probably matters, these legendaries and all this other stuff's going on, but I don't really care. This set, because I'm a Magic fan, I like going to different Magic worlds. I was just like, this is fun. I'm going to enjoy this experience and the limited experience it provides and everything, and then we'll see what the next set looks like.
The difference between Lord of the Rings and this is you and I could show these cards to, or not all of them, but some of these cards to our parents, and they would get what was going on.
Sure.
Lord of the Rings requires you to be a fan of specifically Lord of the Rings to appreciate it.
Yeah.
And lots of people are.
Yeah, absolutely.
No harm there for sure. But it is nice to sort of be leaning into broader tropes or stories that are a little bit better known historically, because that is art that everyone can appreciate. It's not just people who are fans of a certain property or super invested Magic players rather. You show people the food cards, the gingerbread people, some of the other stuff going on. They'll get it.
Yeah.
They'll get it, even if they don't know the rules of the game.
Well, everybody, that has been the Presleevables for Wilds of Eldraine. We tried to cover everything that we could. We hope you guys enjoyed it. You can, of course, let us know in the comments what you think we got right, what you think we got wrong, all of that jazz. And we'll check those out and we'll interact with you. Of course, if you're not subscribed to the page, feel free to do so over at the Resleevables on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at the Resleevables as well. And we'll have more episodes of that stuff coming out now. But our second run of the Presleevables is done. So for Patrick Sullivan, I am Cedric Phillips. Thank you guys so much for watching.